The second thing that banks need to do is actually define a mission, a purpose, and a set of values which will take them into the future. Now, you look at me and say, but that's business school 101. And, you know, you assume that banks all have mission statements and values, etc., etc. And in fact, they do. And I actually, in doing my research for the book, I took time out and I looked at quite a few mission and value statements for banks. Interestingly enough, most of them looked all the same. You could not tell one bank from another. There wasn't a distinguishing feature that said, well, this bank is different from this bank because this is where their emphasis is. Now, I compare that to someone, an organization like Google. We look at Google's mission and values. Google's mission statement actually says something along the lines of, our aim is to take all the information in the world and make it accessible for everyone. I know what they do. They're telling me what they do. That's their raison d'etre. That's the reason why they exist. That is what they want to do. In a company like Merck says, you know, they want to use science, you know, to advance humanity and make a better world. I know what they do. I know what they want to do. When you look at banks, and I looked at a whole number of banks, you know, they say things like, we're going to offer our customers nice products, we hire the best people, you know, we care about the community, but there's nothing there that tells you what it is they stand for. Actually, there was one exception, and it was Lehman Brothers. And Lehman Brothers were boldly stated that they were about shareholder returns and shareholder net value and all that sort of stuff. We can only wonder what their shareholders think about that right now, but they were the one that actually stood out amongst the banking institutions that I looked at. And so the thing that actually struck me about this, I said to myself, this is why they all fell off the same cliff. Because if you have no distinguishing purpose, one bank from another, then it means all you're going to do is play follow the leader, or jump to the next product, or jump to the next market. And you know, I have experienced that personally. I spent a lot of time doing business strategies in banks, and very often someone on the trading floor would call me over and say, Jonathan, we need to do this new product. We want you to set up the strategy, lay it out for us, and you know, make sure that we can get management approval, and we can get approval from operations, etc., etc. And the first question I always asked them was, why are we doing this product? And they'd think about it for a while and I'd say, well, Merrill Lynch is doing it. Or Morgan Stanley is doing it. Not because this is what we want to do as an organization. And you know, we have seen that play out, you know, in a very, very big way. Take, for example, Merrill Lynch, very, very interesting institution. I went to do an interview at Merrill Lynch sometime in the 90s, and the interviewer was the head of European equities. And during the interview, and you know, things went really well, and he said to me, how much P&L, how much trading P&L do you think we've made so far this year? And I think this is Merrill Lynch, the largest securities house in the world at that time, and it's, you know, quite far on in the year. And I said, millions and millions. And he showed it to me. He says, we've only made $500,000 trading P&L so far for the year. This was back in the 90s. And I was stunned. And I was just, wow. He says, we're not a trading and risk house, he said. What we do is we originate and we distribute. I remember Merrill Lynch had a retail network, a comprehensive retail network, so that they could originate on Wall Street in the morning and, you know, distribute all the way down to Main Street in the afternoon. That's how good they were. Then along came Stan O'Neill and said, we want to be big risk takers and risk traders like Goldman Sachs. And lo and behold, Merrill Lynch was blown apart. UBS is another very interesting example. Fantastic, historically, a fantastic wealth management capability. And then they decided, they wanted to take on the investment banking world. I think they actually stated that they too wanted to make more trading P&L like Goldman Sachs. And that blew up. I mean, they nearly died if it wasn't for the Swiss National Bank pumping in billions of dollars. But that's a prime example. But the other thing that we need to recognize is that this inability to define who they are, and what they do is the primary cause of too big to fail, or TBTF. And what too big to fail means is also too big to manage. And so establishing a mission and a purpose is the most, apart from thinking independently, is the most critical thing an organization can do, or a bank can do. And some people say, well, how do you go about doing that? And yeah, a lot of strategists look at the art of war, but I have something more recent. I have a passion for history, and I was looking at the German Indo-Nazi invasion of Soviet Russia in 1941. And it was a tremendous thing. Stalin said, advance, advance, attack, attack, attack. And every time they were just rounded up by the hundreds of thousands, and they kept losing, and they kept losing, and they kept losing. And then they got to Moscow, and then most notably Stalingrad, where they could do nothing but defend. And with the help of the Russian winter, they finally won a couple of battles. And then in the summer of 1943 came the Battle of Kursk, which is a full year before D-Day, which is the 2 million men, the largest, and there were women fighting on the Soviet side as well, I should add, the largest clash of armor in history. And the Red Army said, you know what? We now know what we're good at. What we're going to do is we're going to start this battle on the defense, because defense is what we're good at. And for the first time in history, or for the first time up to that point in time, the Nazi blitzkrieg was stopped, and the Germans never launched another attack on the Eastern Front again. And this was a full year before D-Day. Because the Red Army says, or said, this is who we are. This is what we're good at. This is where we stand. This is how we fight. This is how we define who we are. The question is, how many banks can say that today? This is who we are. This is how we define ourselves. This is what we stand for. This is the purpose for which we exist. You see, one of the main problems with banks generally is because we are now in an era where competition is so fierce that the how you do something is more important than the what you do. But for too long, banks have been chasing the what, always on the advance. What's the next product? What's the next customer? What else can I do? Which other market can I go into? Rather than saying, it is more important for us to say to our customers and to the rest of the world, this is how we do what we do. This is who we are. This is how we define ourselves. This is what you can depend on us. Or this is how you can depend on us. Which then leads us to the second point, or the third point, which is, in order to make this happen, you got to have a caliber of management which is different. You got to have managers which have a lead by values, understand the mission, and are ready to share that and move that along with the rest of the organization. Again, you might say, well, that's business school stuff. That's straightforward. But I can tell you, if you walk into any bank today and you ask them to pull out their procedures, they will pull out procedures for you that when they stack them, they will go all the way to the moon and back. They have so many procedures. And then there's so many committees, risk and control. And then, you have a whole group of managers who do nothing but spend their day in meetings. One meeting after the next, controlling this risk, managing that risk. Day after, I call it meetingitis, because that's all these people do, spend their day in actual meetings. And then, of course, we had people like, the Dick Fools of this world, who actually believed that on top of all that, they were in control. But the truth is, controls are less important than values. And so the type of change that we're looking for in the that we must look for in the management of banks is one to a more value-based system rather than just a mere control-based system. And the funny thing is, every time I talk to banks about this, they say, oh, you should talk to HR, which is basically let's outsource the responsibility for shaping the values to HR. But, you know, it's actually ridiculous. As a matter of fact, structurally speaking, HR is a failure because you can't rely on one little team to do all your values. If you think that people and values are the most important thing, then it has to be the responsibility of all your managers. And that's absolutely quite crucial. And the model which I think about when I think of this is because, you see, we are so top-down in our approach, and everything flows from the top. And if you look at the language, it's all about authority and governance and presidents and directors and executives, and it's so authoritative. But I've been looking at a model which I found most interesting. I call it the Swiss model, or the Swiss president. And if you look at Switzerland, you would think, and I just spent 3 weeks in Zurich, and I just found it most interesting. And I thought to myself, if you were to take, say, I'm going to create a country right now. I'm going to put some Frenchmen and women, some Germans, Italians and Romansh, and put them together, and you'd say to yourself, well, such a country would never work. But that's Switzerland, and it works. Why does it work? Because there are a set of values which bring that country together. And the interesting thing about Switzerland, if you ask, you know, who's the president of Switzerland? No one hardly knows, or you literally never heard who that person is. And the reason is that the Swiss have a confederate council of like 7 members. And one person is the chair of that council every year. The last 2 chairs, and therefore presidents of Switzerland, were women, something which, by the way, doesn't happen very often in banks. But it is that type, because what they're about is not enforcing authority, but they're about maintaining a set of values. Because that's how the Swiss came together. They're about a set of people with a set of values irrespective of, you know, their ethnic origin. So, you know, the Swiss model is one that I think banks need to think about if they are to change from the complete authoritative structure. The other thing is that if you look at the history of any organization or any type of organization, you always find that the worst organizations tend to be the ones with the superstars, like the Bernie Ebbers and the Ken Lays of this world. And for too long in banking, we have been concerned with the superstars, hence the demise. We need to move to a more collegial management style that is more focused on maintaining the values than simply exercising top-down control.